Hello everyone, welcome to today's episode of Easy SAP ABAP. Today we're going to be covering internal tables, what they are, how you create them, how they're created now with the new style of SAP ABAP, and how they were created previously with header lines in old school SAP ABAP. You won't typically write these very much, hopefully not at all. That's kind of the way SAP is going, is we're not going to do this anymore. But you'll still probably have to maintain reports and work with standard SAP code that does use tables with header lines, so we'll go over that too. And then third and lastly, we're going to actually go over how to read data from internal tables, and that could be either reading multiple lines of data at one time via the loop statement, or reading single lines of data into a structure via the read table statement. So this is a lot to unpack in one episode, so let's just go ahead and get started. So to create, well, first off, what is an internal table? An internal table is a table-like structure that we can use in our ABAP programs where we can populate data via a couple of different ways. Mainly you're selecting data from a database table and putting it into an internal table. And then you can use that data locally in your program. So you can select data into an internal table. You can actually modify database tables from internal tables, but more than likely what you're going to be doing when you're writing reports is you're going to be taking internal table data, processing it, working with this local copy of data, not touching the actual database table data, but touching this internal table data, manipulating it, and reporting on it. So let's get started with the first way. We can go ahead and declare an internal table. We'll use the data, and then we can say, and I like to use the prefix GT for global table, so global internal table, and then we'll just say SPFLI, type table of SPFLI. So what this does is it creates the new way a internal table called GT-SPFLI, and it is of the type SPFLI. So SPFLI, of course, is a database table. If we double click on it, we are taken to view that database table in the data dictionary transaction SE11. So we can see this is the structure of it. So we create an internal table just like our database table with this statement. Now, if we take a look at it, actually, let's go ahead and set a breakpoint after we declare it. We'll take a look at it in the debugger so you can see what it kind of looks like. And, not going to be very exciting, but let's show you what an internal table looks like in the debugger. This is something you'll be using an awful lot. It's stepping through programs in the debugger. So if we look here, we double click this GT-SPFLI, which is our internal table. We can see here that this is a value that we want to take a peek at. We see here it is 0 by 16. So this first one is going to be the actual count of the rows. So we just declared this internal table. Therefore, there's nothing in it. By 16, so this is the field length. So if I double click on this GT-SPFLI, I'm actually taken to a view of the internal table, and we see all the fields here, just like we saw in the data dictionary. So now, we saw how we created an internal table. Let's take another look at a different way of creating an internal table. Say, for example, we want data from SPFLI, but we don't need the entire, every field in this database table. So what we're going to do, let's just say we want country from, or let's do carrier ID and connection ID. So maybe we want just those two fields. So then what we'll do is we'll use the type statement to define a new type, and we do that by saying types begin up, and then we give our type a name. I always prefix it with TY underscore, and then I'll say SPFLI. We could call this whatever we want. Then I have to actually name the fields in it. So I'm just going to name it the same thing as the database table name. I'll say car ID, type SPFLI. We have to give it a type, car ID, and then con ID, type SPFLI, con ID. And then we finish off defining our type by saying end of TY SPFLI. So instead of using this type table of SPFLI, what we can do is say type table of TY underscore SPFLI. So now, let's go ahead and create another breakpoint. We'll take another look in the debugger so we can see what this looks like. So now, instead of having an internal table, GT-SPFLI of type SPFLI, we're saying of type TY-SPFLI, which is essentially just a dumbed down version. It's only got these two fields. Now, you might be saying, what's the use in that? Not so much when we're working with one table. We're just excluding fields, only selecting fields that we need. But it's very useful when we start having structures, these different types here, these structures that have fields from multiple database tables. So if we take a look at GT-SPFLI, we can see it's 0 by 2, which means it's got nothing in it currently, 0 rows, and it has 2 fields. Double click on it, and we can see carrier ID, connection ID. So that is the two new ways that we can declare internal tables. So let's take a look at the old way. Remember, I came up here and I said we have the new style, we have the old style with header line. So what is a header line? So a header line, if you think about, I guess the best way to demonstrate this is probably to pull up maybe an Excel spreadsheet. Oh, I don't know if I have Excel set up on this computer. Yeah, I sure don't. So think about an Excel spreadsheet. Think about an actual table here. You've got, a field. Let's just do this. Having to improvise here, guys. Sorry, didn't know that I didn't have that set up. So you've got one field here. It might be a first name, so I'll say Dustin. Last name. My last name is going to fit there. And then maybe I'll have another field here, and it's Jane Doe. And then maybe a good old John Smith or something down here. So this illustrates kind of pretty good what I was going to try and let you guys on. So these lines of data here, this is a table, right? So this is our table. It's got 2 fields, first name, last name. These lines of data can be represented individually by a specific type, like TY-SPFLI. We've got 2 fields and a specific type. So what a header line is nothing more than this blank row down here. It is a structure of this type with 2 fields, or however many fields we define, that we can use to reference a line of an internal table. So like I said, you won't be using that much. What you will see to define an internal table with a header line, you're going to come down here and say data begin of, and then you'll say your internal table name. So GT-SPFLI occurs 0, and then you'd say car ID type SPFLI car ID con ID type SPFLI con ID. I know a lot of you guys are saying, why is he teaching us old ways of doing stuff? But you're going to come across this in old code, an old legacy code that you will have to maintain. So and the reason, I'll go over why this is confusing and we don't want to use the old school way of doing it. So GT-SPFLI is here declared with a header line. So what is a header line? A header line means that this structure, GT-SPFLI, refers to the internal table, but it also refers to the structure used to append data to the internal table. So essentially you have one name for 2 different objects, and this can be very, very confusing. So you can access it as if it were a structure, like so. So we're accessing this and assigning components of the structure a variable value, AA and BB respectively. But we can also say append GT-SPFLI. So what we're saying here is append the internal table from the structure. So you'll see this type of syntax used a lot. in older programs, this is extremely confusing because you have two different variables essentially, one being the internal table, one being a line of the internal table, and all referenced with the same name. So that's confusing. That's why they don't recommend you do that anymore. So instead of doing that, I'll actually get rid of it. We'll declare an internal table of type TY SPFLI, so an internal table with these two rows, right? Let's go ahead and select some data into our internal table. Select star from, well, we can't do star. Let's do select carrier ID, con ID, into table GT SPFLI from SPFLI. I'm not going to use a where clause here because I know this table doesn't have very much in it. So what we're going to have here happen, let's go ahead and activate this. I should have put a breakpoint in there. Probably just leave one down here for later so I don't forget to keep taking it out. Go ahead and activate this program. I'm going to go ahead and run it and view in the debugger what's happening here. When we define our internal table and select data into our internal table. So look at GTSPFLI. We see it has 26 records. It's two fields, 2 columns long. So we see our different carrier ID and connection IDs. So that's how you get data into an internal table. Now, fun story here. It does matter what order. So if it's carrier ID here, con ID here, we have to select it in the same order here or else it's going to get wonky. So let's say instead of con ID, let's do city from, and then this will illustrate the point that this structure isn't going to know, this let's see, this might even throw an exception because they're so different, but you can see we do get a warning down there. So yeah, we get a short dump in this case. So you want to be very, very careful about the order which you select fields. So what you can do, which is not as great for performance, but you can do it if you say, for example, have a whole bunch of data you're selecting. You don't want to explicitly name out all 100 fields from tables with join statements and all that. So what you can do is you can come in here and select star into corresponding fields of table GTSPFLI. And what the into corresponding fields of table addition will do is it will select based on the name of the fields. So it'll look at SPFLI and say, okay, I've got a field called car ID, I've got a field called con ID, put them in the appropriately named fields of this GT SPFLI. So that's how we get data into our internal table. We can also create a structure. So remember I said this type SPFLI, this is just a type definition. We can create a structure from it. We say GS for global structure, SPFLI, type TY SPFLI. So instead of a table, we have a structure. So now what we can do is we can say GS SPFLI and fill the components of the structure. Now our structure, let's actually set a break here, and then I'll append our global structure, GTSPFLI, to GTSPFLI. And what this is going to do is it's going to append this one structure that we filled out, aka a row of an internal table, to our internal table. So go ahead and activate this just so we can look at it as it's happening. So now what we'll see is we've created a structure and an internal table. We've filled out the structure at this point. So if I double click on GSSPFLI, I can double click here on GSSPFLI. It'll show me carrier ID and connection ID. Okay, so con ID has to be a number, so that's why this didn't work. I put in ZZ, it needs to be like 1, 2, 3. So that's what happens there. Now if we take a look at our internal table, GTSPFLI, we see there's nothing in there because this append statement hasn't run yet. Now, let's run it. So now our append statement's run. We can look at GTSPFLI. double click on it, and we see we have one row, and this would have been ZZZ, but this is of type number, so that's my bad there. Let's go ahead and fix that. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we'll get rid of this breakpoint now, because you guys understand at this point how to append data to an internal table. What we'll do next is how do we read data from an internal table. So let's go ahead and I'll just copy this. Now ideally when you get done with a structure you want to clear the structure. So this resets all of the fields. In this case I'm actually going to be explicitly setting all of the fields again, so I don't need to clear my structure, but you definitely want to do that in productive code if you think it's going to be used again later. So I'll say let's do AA111, and this is going to be BB. I'll do 2222, and then CC 3333. And I've cleared my structure after I've done this. So I've appended 3 rows to our internal table. We have a breakpoint down there. We can go ahead and run our code and take a look at the state of everything. So what we're going to see is we're going to see this internal table with 3 lines in it. AAA, or AA, BB, and CC with the respective con ID. So let's double click on GTSPFLI. We see it has 3 by 2, so it's 2 fields, 3 rows. Double click on GTSPFLI. We see AA, BB, and CC all filled out. So now this is a local copy of this data. You know, we could have gotten this from a select statement from the actual database. In this case, we're constructing it manually, which you'll find yourself doing from time to time, just, you know, for various reasons. Now at this point, what we can do is we want to get data from an internal table. So we've selected this data here from the database. We don't know what is in the internal table, but now we know we're looking for, let's say, a record with car ID of AA. So what we can do is we can say read table. This will get a I know I'm kind of going out of order here. I said loop at, and then, well, actually let's do loop first. Let's do loop. So loop at implies that you are carrying an action out in a loop. You are doing it more than one time. So if you want, you can read multiple rows of an internal table and process them line by line. So I'll go ahead and give you an example of that. So let's say we want to figure out every carrier ID in the internal table. So I'll say loop at GTSPFLI. You'll see this syntax for old programs, loop at GTSPFLI. And what this means is this is an internal table with a header line. Loop the internal table and fill the header line, which remember is the same named variable. So that can be very confusing. So what we do with new tables, loop at GTSPFLI, we have to use the into addition and give a structure that matches the line of that table. So we're saying loop at our internal table into this structure that's like a line of it. And now if we do write, just so we can see some output, GSSPFLI carrier ID, we're looping at this internal table into this structure. We're accessing the component of that structure called carrier ID and writing it out. So let's go ahead and run our code. We should get 3 carrier IDs written to the screen because we inserted 3 lines. Breakpoint. So we see AA, BB, CC. So that's how we access data in a loop. We can, you know, do things here. We can say, you know, some logic. If our carrier ID equals AA, then, you know, do something. We can do all kind of things in here. That's left up to you to decide in your own program. Another thing we can do with this loop at, we can add the where clause on our loop at. So we can say loop at GTSPFLI into GSPFLI where carrier ID equals AA. So now, in this case, we've only got 1 carrier ID of AA. So when we're looping, it's only going to loop at records where this is true, where carrier ID equals AA. So now if we run this code, we should only get one line of output where it's going to write AA. And we see that's the case. So that's how you do looping on an internal table, which is where you're wanting to process multiple rows, and you've got stuff you want to do with more than one row. Now, read table is another interesting keyword we can use here that reads a table. It reads one record from a table, and it reads it into a structure. This is the most common way that you're going to see this used is one of two ways. You're going to say read table, and then you're going to have your internal table, GT SPFLI, into, you got to give the structure name, so read GT SPFLI into GS SPFLI. And you can't say where. You see we get it in red, it's an error. We can say with key, car ID equals AA. So we can read it with a key. If we have a, car ID equals AA, we can add multiple fields here. I could say con ID equals like this. And it's going to read that table into that structure. If we run this code, we can see that it'll do just that. Let's go ahead and see what's in our structure, GS SPFLI. If we double click on it, we see it's got AA and 11111. See, it's all filled out. So that's how the read table statement works. The read table statement also works with another addition besides with key. We can say index. So we can give a table index 1. So I know there's going to be three different rows in this internal table. Now if I read it index 1, I should get the first row. So let's go ahead and run this, and we'll see that in our structure GSSPFLI we get the first row, AA and 1111. So that sums up the read table statement, the loop at statement. Again, we can do this loop at old school way with header lines. Not going to see that in new developments, but you won't see this into structure. Same thing here. You might say read GT SPFLI index 1. This is perfectly valid syntax if this is a table with a header line. If it's not, then we go ahead and check our code. We'll see here we have to specify into WA work area, which is our structure. Or we can use, of course, transporting no fields. Transporting no fields essentially means you're reading the table just to check sy-subrc to see if there was a result returned or not. But that's a little bit further into the read table statement and probably a lesson for another time. So just wanted to give you guys a quick overview of what the hell is an internal table, how do I create it, what's the old style versus the new style syntax, how to read data from an internal table either by using loop or by using read table. If you guys have any questions at all in relation to this video, please feel free to leave me a comment. I do try and answer any sort of questions you guys may have, be it either via the comments or emails, or sometimes I'll even make a video addressing your specific thing if it's something that I don't already have. So please feel free to ask any questions. If you wouldn't mind, please give me a like and give me a subscribe if this really helped you out, and we'll see you in the next video. Thank you.